Hello and welcome back to Bigfoot Lake. Tonight we share another Bigfoot encounter, but this encounter is not just any Bigfoot encounter. Have you ever heard of the Mount St Helens Bigfoot attacks? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, so pull up a stump, sit back, relax as we tell the story of the 1924 Mount St Helens Bigfoot attack. In 1924, a group of prospectors near Mount St Helens related a story that's commonly credited with bringing Bigfoot to the 20th century imagination. The story was widely printed in the newspapers, and it set off an ape hunt in the surrounding area at that time. It's been retold and rewritten about and reenacted for decades ever since. First of all, I wish to give an account of the attack and tell of the famous incident of July 1924 when the hairy apes attacked our cabin. We had been prospecting for 6 years in the Mount St Helens and Lewis River area in South Washington. We had, from time to time, come across large tracks by creek beds and springs. In 1924, I and 4 other miners were working our gold claim, the Vanderwhite. It was 2 miles east of Mount St Helens, near a deep canyon which is now named Ape Canyon. It was so named after an account of the incident after it reached newspapers. Hank, a great hunter and a good woodsman, he was always a little apprehensive after seeing those huge tracks. The tracks were large, and we knew that no known animal could have made them. The largest measured 19 inches long. 19 inches, that's a big track. It was in the middle of July, and we had received a good assay on our claim, and everyone was excited. We had been hearing noises in the evening for about a week. We heard a shrill, peculiar whistling. Each and every evening we heard this. We would hear it coming from one ridge, and then hear an answering whistling from another ridge. We also heard a sound which I could best describe as a booming, thumping sound, just like something was hitting itself on its chest. Hank asked me to accompany him to the spring, about 100 yards from our cabin, to get some water, and he also suggested that we take our rifles to be on the safe side. We walked to the spring, and then Hank yelled and raised his rifle, and at that instant, I saw it. It was a hairy creature, and he was about 100 yards away on the other side of a little canyon, standing by a pine tree. It dodged behind the tree and poked its head out from the side of the tree, and at the same time, Hank shot. I could see the bark fly out from the tree from each side of his 3 shots. Someone may say that was quite a distance to see the bark fly, but I saw it. The creature I judged to have been about 7 feet tall, with blackish brown hair. It disappeared from our view for a short time, but then we saw it, running fast and running upright, about 200 yards down the little canyon. I shot 3 times before it disappeared from view. We took the water back to the cabin and explained the affair to the rest of the party, and we all agreed, including Hank, to go home the next morning, as it would be dark before we could get to the car. We agreed it would be unsound to be caught by darkness on the way out. Nightfall found us in our pine log cabin. About midnight, we were all awakened by a tremendous thud against the cabin wall. Then we heard a great commotion outside, It sounded like a great number of feet trampling and rattling over a pile of our unused shakes. We all grabbed our guns. By actual count, we saw only 3 of the creatures together at one time, but it sounded like there were many more. This was the start of the famous attack, of which much has been written in the Washington and Oregon papers throughout the years. Most accounts tell of giant boulders being hurled against the cabin, and say some even fell through the roof, but this was not quite the case. There were a few large rocks around in that area. It's true that many smaller ones were hurled at the cabin, but they did not break through the roof, but hit with a bang and rolled off. Some accounts state that I was hit in the head by a rock and knocked unconscious. This is not true. The only time we shot our guns that night was when the creatures were attacking our cabin. When they would quiet down for a few minutes, we would quit shooting. I told the rest of the party that maybe if they saw we were only shooting when they attacked, they might realize we were only defending ourselves. We did shoot, however, when they climbed up on our roof. We shot round after round through the roof. We had to brace the hewed log door with a long pole taken from the bunk bed. The creatures were pushing against it, and the whole door vibrated from the impact. We responded by firing many more rounds through the door. They pushed against the walls of the cabin as if trying to push the cabin over. Hank and I did most of the shooting. The rest of the party crowded to the far end of the cabin with their guns in their hands. One had a pistol, which still is in my family's possession. The others clutched their rifles. They seemed stunned and incredulous. The attack continued the remainder of the night, with only short intervals between. The attack ended just before daylight. Just as soon as we were sure it was light enough to see, we came cautiously out of the cabin. It was not long before I saw one of the ape-like creatures, standing about 80 yards away near the edge of Ape Canyon. I shot 3 times, and it toppled over the cliff, down into the gorge, some 400 feet below. Then Hank said that we should get out of there as soon as possible and not bother to pack up our supplies or even trying to get our equipment out. After all, he said, it's better to lose them than our lives. We were all only too glad to agree. When we were back home in Kelso, Washington, Hank told some of his friends, and somehow the story leaked out to the papers, and the great hairy ape hunt of 1924 was on. So that was the encounter on Mount St Helens in 1924, the famous Bigfoot attack on these prospectors. What do you think? Is this a story that you've heard before? I've many times heard a lot of different interpretations of this event, this encounter. But this is from firsthand from those who were there. This is the true story from their point of view. So what do you think? Is this a tall tale? Some believe so, but many others don't. Do you think this could be a true, legitimate Bigfoot encounter on Mount St Helens? Is there something mysterious still lurking there? Now, much of that area has changed quite a bit. This area where this encounter took place is really close to Spirit Lake. And if you remember, when Mount St Helens erupted, a lot of that topography of that land changed with that massive landslide from that eruption. So, what was buried in that eruption? There's been stories upon stories about the mysteries of that. But this was the encounter from first-hand points of view. So let me know in the comments what you think. Have you heard this before? And if you like the story, hit that thumbs up. I would appreciate that. And if you're not, I would appreciate if you would subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any more stories as we gather each night at Bigfoot Lake. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Appreciate you all. Hope you have a great night, and we'll see you on the next.